Today I'm going to show you how to do moss stitch, which is also called seed stitch. You can see that? Got a sort of, I'd say it's sort of polka dot sort of texture. There's like dashed lines going down and across, sort of checkerboard. Once again, all it is a combination of knit and purl stitches. I have cast on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11 stitches. If you're doing the moss stitch, I recommend using an odd number of stitches. This means that you can knit one stitch, purl one stitch, knit one stitch, purl one stitch, all the way down, and you end with a knit stitch, and you start with a knit stitch each time. So it's knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. This way you always remember that you knit a stitch first. If you do an even number of stitches, which is also perfectly possible, you have to start with a knit stitch and alternate down. Then on the next row you start with a purl stitch and alternate down. And sometimes when I'm doing it, at least, I keep forgetting which one I'm supposed to be doing on the next row. So it can get a bit confusing if you do an even number of stitches, but it's perfectly possible, so don't worry about that. So I'll just show you how I'm going to do the next line, and it's just a case of repeating it unless you have an even number of stitches, as I just said, and then you have to alternate between starting with purl stitch and starting with a knit stitch. So I'm going to start with a knit stitch. Now the important thing is, because you're alternating between knit and purl between each and every stitch, this yarn, which has to be at the back for knit stitch and at the front for purl stitch, has to swap from front to back or back to front between each and every stitch. So I've just done a knit stitch, so the working yarn will be at the back. So to do a purl stitch next, you have to bring the yarn through between the needles to bring it to the front. Then you do a purl stitch. Now the working yarn is at the front. To do the next knit stitch, it has to go to the back. So it goes through the centre of the needles to the back. You just have to remember to do this between each and every stitch if you're swapping between knit and purl. So now you knit. Then the yarn comes back through to the front for the purl. Back through to the back for the knit. Through to the front for the purl. Through to the back for the knit. And so on, all the way down. Back to the back for the last knit stitch, and then you just do the next row and start again with a knit stitch. And I'm just going to repeat what I said before, that if you've got an even number of stitches, then you have to start with a purl, start with a knit, alternate through, and you'll end on a purl. Then you start on a purl, end on a knit, and start on a knit, end on a purl, and you keep going like that, trying to remember what stitch you're supposed to be starting on each row. Otherwise you can get a bit confused. That I found to my cost. And that's why I try and use the odd number of stitches for this. As I said previously in my stockinette video, stockinette, when you do, say you do a big rectangle of it, it will curl in at the edges, which isn't a look you really want. Often people put a border of moss or seed stitch around the edges so that it stops the stockinette curling. Often when you're using stockinette, people do it in narrow sections so it doesn't have a long enough edge to curl inwards. Either that or use a border like this. Adds a nice texture to it. If you've got any questions about it, just let me know. And I hope you join me for the next video.